Hi class, welcome. This week we're going to be talking about one of my favorite topics in interpersonal communication, and that is interpersonal communication and the self. This week it's all about you. Now, before we begin, I want you guys to start thinking about things that make up you. For example, social roles. Are you a good friend? Are you a basketball player? I want you to start thinking about physical characteristics. Do you like your nose, the way your nose looks? Do you like the way your face looks? Are you happy with your weight? And then let's go a little bit deeper. Let's talk about some of the belief systems that you hold dear, your political choices and beliefs, your moral choices and beliefs, your faith. All of these things make up your self-concept and make up yourself. And what, to the degree that you place value on, is what determines your self-esteem. So in other words, what's important to you is going to determine your self-esteem. So if you place a lot of value on weight and you are overweight, for example, then of course you're going to have a low self-esteem. If you value maybe being smart and educated and you achieve well academically, you're going to have a really high self-esteem. It's all about what value that you place on physical characteristics or social characteristics that determines the way that you view yourself. For example, I love myself. I value my faith, and I have a very strong faith, and my confidence comes from God. And so I have a really healthy self-esteem. I didn't always, though. Let's keep watching. It's time to meet yourself. Now, I want you guys to start thinking about the following questions. How do you feel about yourself? How do you feel about the way that you look? Now, let's go a little bit deeper because that's kind of superficial for some people. How do you feel about your accomplishments? How do you feel about your gifts, your talents, the things that you excel at? How do you feel about your goals, your hopes and dreams for your life? Do you dream? Do you hope? Now let's go way, way, way deeper. Let's go really deep. Who has influenced how you view yourself? It could be a parent, it could be a coach, it could be a teacher. Somebody has spoken into your life, and it could be positive or negative because we don't always get great parents or come from, the perfect family house, two-parent household, or we don't always come from the perfect family. Sometimes we get negative messages, and those messages stay with us and they influence how we view ourselves well into adulthood. I can still hear some of the things that my mom used to say to me when I was a kid. I used to be able to hear some of the not so good things that were said to me when I was a kid. So I want you guys to start thinking about these things because all of these things flow into your self-concept and they influence how we interact with the world around us. Okay, guys, so far we've looked at how communication shapes the way that we as communicators view ourselves. Now I want you guys to focus on the topic of impression management. And that's basically communication strategies that we use every day, whether you realize it or not. We use them every day, and we use them to influence how others view us. Some people, you can think about your social media account, how, you only post certain pictures so that people can view you a certain way. You want to be seen as happy and sophisticated and intelligent, so you're going to post certain pictures to reveal the like. Now, and that's just an example. What we choose to disclose about ourselves is an important component of impression management. So what do we self-disclose, right? Now, one might argue that aside from secrets, it's impossible not to make yourself known to others. And it's just, how are they going to know you? How are you going to be known? Self-disclosure consists of honest, revealing messages about yourself that are intentionally directed towards others. Disclosing communication that contains information that is generally unavailable via other sources. And that means that somebody can't pull up a Facebook page or a social media page and find out information about you. It has to come from inside of you. It has to come from you, and it has to be something that's not going to be generally known if they do a quick Google internet search, right? You have thousands of friends on social media, but you don't really know them. It's a one-dimensional, it's very one-dimensional, if you will. To really know someone, you don't just see them when they're happy all the time. If you really know someone, you know, you're going to know, okay, they react this way when they're mad. They react this way when they're challenged. They react this way. They like to cook, and they like, you know, the intricate details about your life. I mean, about their life, you know, to really, really know somebody. And that's a part of self-disclosure. The percentage of messages actually that are truly self-disclosing in our day-to-day interpersonal communication are actually very low. People don't really know you. They don't really know you most of the time, and that's according to the research. There are a number of factors that govern whether a communicator will be judged as a high or low level discloser. Now, there are several reasons that you can choose not to self-disclose, and you can, you know, for example, there are alternatives to revealing things about yourself. You can be silent and not say anything. You know, that person that's quiet all the time. You can lie. We call them in communication little white lies. You can equivocate, or you can drop hints. Now, these may be ethical. These are considered ethical alternatives to self-disclosure. And they may not always be ethical. Like when somebody is lying to you or equivocating or hinting, it may not always be ethical. It depends on the speaker's motives, and it also depends on the effects of deception. So don't just go out there, you know, lying and self-disclosure. Let me wrap this up in a ball for you, because I did a lot of you know, communication terms and academic terms. Let me just speak in lay terms. Self-disclosure is basically a house. The house represents you, and someone comes to your door when you meet someone new, and they're like, can I come in? Self-disclosure is basically like, how far are you going to let them in your house? Now, people you don't know, or that some of us have a wall up, and we're just like, no, you can't come in. We don't want any new relationships. We don't want to talk to anybody. And then some of us are very friendly. We let anybody come in our house, right? And then some of us, you know, will let you in, you know, maybe we'll let you in our living room. Maybe you can go in the kitchen. There are certain rooms that we won't let anybody in, right? There are certain secrets that people have that we're going to take to the grave. So that's that room that no one can go into. We have the master bedroom, you know, that you can come in maybe if you're in a romantic relationship, for example. So basically, I like to think of self-disclosure as your life, your house, and the rooms that you will allow people to come in. Again, if you're very welcoming, you will allow people to come in maybe to your living room. And so you need to decide, you know, who to trust. Self-disclosure is all about trust and revealing information about you. And I think it's a privilege to be known. It's a privilege to know you. So you should really guard, you know, who you allow into your house. And then again, we don't want to be super guarded, overly guarded, because we might miss out on some really great relationships. So it's just all about your judgment and who you decide to reveal and who you decide to allow the privilege to get to know you. So in communication, there are two models of describing self-disclosure, and those are the social penetration model and the Johari window. Now, the social penetration model, which is not listed here, it describes two dimensions of self-disclosure, which are breadth and depth. The Johari window, now that illustrates the amount of information that an individual reveals to others and the amount of information that he hides, excuse me. So the Johari window is basically, you guys may have experienced this if you work in a corporate setting. It's a technique that helps people better understand their relationships with themselves and also with others, how you're showing up in the world. And it was created by psychologist Joseph Luft and Harrington Ingham in 1955. Whoa, a long time ago, ancient. And it's used primarily, again, like I said, in corporate settings and self-help groups, and it's really considered a heuristic exercise. Now, as you look at the window, you see there are areas in your life that are open and public, and those are areas that you know about yourself and that you choose to reveal to others. There are areas in your life that are hidden, ooh, mystery. And those depict basically what you know about yourself and that you choose to not to reveal to others. You're like, no. And then we have our blind spots, and that's what others know about us, but we don't recognize it in ourselves. And it could be like a personality characteristic that maybe your grandmother sees within you, or it could be like a secret, like that you were adopted, that other people know about you, but you don't really know that about yourself. So it can go pretty deep. And then there are those unknown, and those are basically dimensions of yourself that nobody knows. Here are some situations where you definitely want to consider self-disclosure. For example, you're on a first date, do you want to reveal too much information? Some people are like, I just want it all out front. I want them to know everything about me. But for example, if you reveal too much, it might scare people off. Like, for example, if you just got out of rehab, that might be too much for somebody to handle, and they might not want to go on a second date with you. Or another example is in a job interview. Have you ever said too much in a job interview and you're just like, oh my gosh, or not revealed enough and you're like, oh my gosh, I wish would have highlighted that experience because that really translates to this job. And then thirdly, social media. You don't want to put something out there in social media that you're going to regret. Sure, you can take a post down, but it is forever imprinted in the internet. And, think about it. You might have children one day, you might have, a spouse one day, and you might not want them to see something out there on the internet that is out there about you. So those are just some situations to consider when thinking about self-disclosure. Social networking platforms like Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, they all provide opportunities for you to manage impressions about yourself. Now consider how featuring or withholding following kinds of information affect how others might regard your online profile, especially potential employers. Your age, your personal photographs of social photographs that might be too revealing, education, your career accomplishments, your job title, your personal interests, your personal philosophy, your religion, your religious beliefs, your sexual orientation. These are all things that view how others see you. There was one study that analyzed the Instagram feeds of about 27 professional athletes, and the athletes noted how carefully that they presented themselves on social media, and they made sure that they presented themselves in accordance with societal and gender norms, and I thought that was pretty interesting. There was another study where Facebook users were asked to highlight the positives in their profile and to go over their profile and count how many positive basically that they included. And in general, what the undergraduates found is that their profiles portrayed them as better in reality on certain dimensions. Like, for example, they were more funny than they actually were in life. They were more adventurous and outgoing than they actually were in life. And so they were just portrayed as better. Now, viewing your online profile and your online preference from a different kind of perspective, it really can be invaluable in impression management because it can reveal certain things about you. So if you have time, you might want to type your name into a search engine and see what pops up. You may decide that it's time to engage in what researchers call reputation management, especially if you're going on a job interview. And you may want to change, some of the privacy settings on your profile and customize certain updates to delete unwanted information about yourself. So self-disclosure, guys, it varies. Remember that self-disclosure varies among relationships. You're not going to reveal things at work that you're going to reveal to a friend. So you want to, and I know we have work friends, so sometimes the lines get blurred and it can be hard to keep that balance. Okay, remember that self-disclosure is a gradual process. Don't just data dump and tell everybody about, everything. Don't read all your mail on the first day. It's a gradual process. You might want to keep a little bit of a mystery. And then online, it follows a different pattern. Also, It is usually reciprocal. If you reveal something about yourself, I'm gonna tell you something about myself. You know what I mean? You know, people like, oh, you tell me, okay, let me share with you. It's sharing is sharing. It's typically reciprocal. Okay. Um, it can have many different purposes. So people could be revealing things about themselves because they want to get a job promotion. So you could say, yeah, I handled this, particular project back in, 2016. People might be revealing because they want something, or because they want you to go out with them. They might be revealing, oh, I got it, my trust fund, came through. You want to go on that date, So people have different motives and objectives for revealing things about them. So keep that in mind. It's not always innocent, and it's not always just to get to know you better. And then also, finally, it is definitely influenced by cultural and gender norms. So the answers to the questions that we asked at the beginning of our previous slide offers clues about your self-concept. Now, your self-concept is a relatively stable set of perceptions that you hold about yourself. It includes not only your appearance, your physical appearance, but it also includes other aspects of who you are. Your typical emotional states. Are you happy? Are you sad? Are you pessimistic? Are you optimistic? Do you have special talents? Do you have likes and dislikes? Are you a morning person? Don't bother me in the mornings, right? And things and roles that you hold dear. Do you pride yourself on being a good daughter, a great sister, a good family member? Now, let's move on to self-esteem. Self-esteem is the part of your self-concept that involves evaluations of your self-worth. And your self-concept might include that you're argumentative or that you're serious, but it's basically how you feel about that characteristic and those qualities that determine your self-esteem. So self-esteem evaluations, they begin to come together at a very young age, and they have a very powerful cyclical effect on you as a communicator. So researchers generally agree that self-concept does not exist at birth. And if you ever see that baby, they start to gnaw on their hand and they're like, oh, a toe, that is my toe, that is me, and this is a really, simple um, connection, and it's really a child's earliest concept of the self. But as the child develops, or as we develop, this rudimentary sense of identity expands into a much more complete and sophisticated picture that is our self-concept in adulthood. And what is fascinating, what I found interesting when I start researching this stuff, is that it's probably almost 100% based on our interpersonal communication. So basically, through reflected appraisal, or through social comparison and evaluating ourselves in comparison with others, our self-concept is developed. I think it's important to remember that you should evaluate what you place your value on, if that makes sense, because then you'll have a healthier self-concept. So just make sure that you are aware of what you value. And you may say, oh, looks aren't important to me, but if you don't look a certain way, or if you don't look like the people in social media, it'll affect your self-esteem. That means that you value looks, So really do some reflection and think about, like, what do I really value? Be honest with yourself, and you'll get a healthier, clearer, I don't know about healthier, but you'll definitely get a clearer picture of your self-esteem and self-concept. How we view and feel about ourselves definitely affect very important things in our interpersonal communication. I don't care what anybody says. We have certain needs as human beings. We have a need for control, as far as we need to feel like we have some sort of input or influence in our relationships. If we experience especially trauma as a child and we lost that sense of agency, that can affect our need for control in adulthood. We have a need to be included. We need to have positive human contact. That is a basic need. And we also need affection. We need to give and receive affection. Okay? Some people will tell you, I don't care about anybody. I don't need anybody. That is not true. We need these things as human beings, and they affect our interpersonal relationships. So there are some pros and cons to self-disclosure. It's not all good, it's not all bad. So let's review. Self-disclosure enhances trust, and it really strengthens bonds in your relationship. It is reciprocal, as we have covered. You tell me something about you, I'm going to tell you something about me. I just feel comfortable, and that's how sharing works, right? It can provide an emotional release. For example, we have had students who will share in their discussion that they have just gotten out of rehab, and then we'll have other students jump in and they're like, oh my gosh, I struggled with X, Y, and Z as well. And so it can provide an emotional release, and it can be encouraging to others. But there are some cons, right? So for example, it can hurt other people. If somebody has ever asked you, do I look fat in these jeans? And you're like, well, you've been eating a lot of, Krispy Kreme donuts lately. So what do you expect? So self-disclosure can also hurt other people's feelings, and also, you could be rejected. Like people could be like, you just got out of rehab. I do not date addicts. My dad was an addict. I do not want to, that's not something that I'm prepared to deal with. And you could get rejected. Again, you can hurt others, you can violate other people's privacy, and then you have a chance of obligating others. Like, let's say you're on a first date with somebody and they reveal like, oh, by the way, I'm a serial killer, right? You're like, okay, I got to go to the police now. So you can obligate others, in certain ways that they don't want to be obligated. So you always want to have a balance and be prudent about what you self-disclose. Remember to love who you are without the titles, without your accomplishments, without being super good looking, without 100,000 social media followers. Remember to be confident and affirm that you are valuable just for being born and just for being you. In wrapping up, I'd love to share a really interesting study with you. It's called the Harvard Grant Study. And this is one of the longest, oldest studies. It's been going on for over 80 years, and I believe it's still continuing to this day. So what the researcher did was he took 268 Harvard undergraduates. They were mostly white males, and this was done in the 1940s, just so you can have an idea of the participants in this study. And they asked them about their mental health. They asked them about their career enjoyment, their physical health. They asked them about their marital quality. And they followed these men throughout their lives, and they got updates throughout their lives through their doctor's appointment, physicals, et cetera, and they would fill out these forms. And what they asked these men was, what they were trying to find out was, what was the biggest predictor of happiness? Don't we all want to know that? What is going to be the biggest predictor of happiness and success in our lives? That's why this study interested me, to be honest, because I was like, ooh, that's interesting. So again, they asked him about career enjoyment, marital quality. They asked him about this throughout their life. And they were able to pinpoint a single determining factor that dictated these men's happiness throughout the course of their lives. Now, what do you think that was? Was it money? That's what most people say, money, because these were very successful men. They were Harvard educated. There was a president in the study. There was a senator in the study. There were doctors, lawyers, very successful, right? It wasn't money. Was it, marriages? It wasn't marriages. It wasn't their bank account. It wasn't the amount of wealth that they were able to amass. It wasn't even their job titles or their career advancement. What they found was the single determinant of happiness in their lives was warmth of relationships in childhood. Warmth of relationships in childhood. You see, we don't exactly remember being held by our mother at 3 months old or 6 months old or 36 months of age. But we have a stored unconscious memory of that affection that we got as a child. And it doesn't have to be just a mother, or it could be any parent or a caregiver. That affection, that experience that we experience from 3 to 5, or from 0 to 5 actually, and 13 to 70 are hugely effective in how we develop our sense of self and how we show up in the world and interact with people in our adult lives. And is the single most determining factor. That warmth of relationship in childhood is the single biggest determining factor of our happiness. Now, there was a secondary finding that I think you guys will find interesting, was that if they did not come from a good childhood home, they did not have those good relationships, if they found a solid relationship later on in life, then they were course corrected towards optimal human wellness, optimum happiness. If they found a marriage later on in life, if they had a child later on in life that they developed a strong relationship with, then they were course corrected. So just because you don't come from the perfect Leave It to Beaver family does not mean that you are not going to have a happy, healthy life. I guess you would say, to summarize this story, or the main point of this story, is that our relationships matter. Your relationships, they matter. They matter because they shape and influence how we feel about ourselves and how we view the world around us and how we show up in the world around us. That's all I got for you, is that to really think about your relationships, how they have impacted you, the ones that you need to change, the ones that you want to strengthen, the ones that you want to, cut out, toxic relationships, and the ones that you hope to forge in the future. Well, that's all I got for you today. I'm Professor Heron, and this has been your lecture on interpersonal communication and the self. Can you tell it's one of my favorite lectures? I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, or outbursts. Have a great week.